Okay, we're back at it. I ran out of time on my on that last video. So proteins make up antibodies. Antibodies defend us from harmful diseases, and we have memory cells that remember our exposure to any particular disease or even a vaccine. It can remember exposure to that vaccine and essentially can launch antibodies right when we're exposed to something, which is incredible. Hormones. So hormones are also a type of protein. There are a few hormones like estrogen and progesterone that are steroids that, of course, are called lipids. But we have many, many hormones that are proteins. And then lastly, we know that our movement, so the movement of our muscles, is responsible because of the action of proteins. Okay, so remember we were talking about breaking up and breaking down and building up. So a peptide bond is essentially the bonding between two amino acids. So you probably know that the basic subunit of a protein is an amino acid. We have essential amino acids that we need in our diet, and we can make a number of amino acids. In order to take those amino acids and build them up into proteins in our body, we use peptide bonds. So the polar covalent bond between two amino acids brings them together. And again, we are going to do something called dehydration. So we're taking out that water so we can create that bond. So we're making a larger molecule. We can add water and then essentially disassociate those two subunits so they're individual amino acids again. So we're constantly breaking up and building up and breaking down. Polypeptide, again, poly just means many, so 3 or more amino acids linked together. So this is how we make all of those proteins. Okay, the third category of our macromolecules are nucleic acids. Think DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA, ribonucleic acid. We also have ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. So let's try to understand the nucleic acids. Essentially, their basic subunit is a nucleotide. So our fats were lipids and fatty acids. Our proteins were glucose. Our carbohydrates were glucose, and our proteins were our amino acids. So for our nucleic acids, we have polymers of nucleotides. Okay, so these nucleotides are made up of 3 different parts: a phosphate, a 5-carbon sugar, and a nitrogenous base. We will go through those a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. But our nucleic acids, let's think again, DNA and RNA store information. Super important. Contain the instructions for life. RNA is going to contain instructions for proteins. DNA is going to remember, it's going to have the genes and the variations of the genes and all that good stuff, going to code for your features and all the things that you need to be you. And we know that nucleic acids are also important to conduct chemical reactions, and those are called coenzymes. So here are the 3 plus the 4th would be coenzymes. So we have our DNA, our RNA, and then the ATP. So I think you probably know DNA. So DNA codes for the proteins because the genes are on the DNA. But when we code for a protein, we're going to use a variety of RNA. So one of them is messenger RNA. We also have transfer RNA. We also have ribosomal RNA. And essentially, that's going to be important to the expression of those genes and making proteins. Adenosine triphosphate is essentially the form of nucleic acid and the form of energy that our cells use to do work. So ATP stores energy. And how does it do that? Glad you asked. It's going to do that with some phosphate bonds, which we'll come right back to. So let's compare DNA and RNA, which can be kind of confusing. If you can keep track that DNA, of course, has our genes, codes for all the instructions for life, and DNA codes for RNA. And RNA makes protein. So each of them has a sugar. DNA has deoxyribose, so deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA has ribose. So 2 different kinds of sugar, and RNA is ribonucleic acid. Okay, they're bases. They each have adenine. They each have guanine. They each have cytosine. What we see as different is that DNA has thymine. RNA doesn't have thymine. Instead, it uses uracil. So these 4 bases, these 4 nitrogenous bases, well, plus 5, there's 5 of them, are super important to coding information. Okay, DNA, double-stranded. RNA, single-stranded. and DNA forms a helix, and RNA is just linear. Here we see our DNA, double-stranded. These nitrogenous bases interact, look, with these dashed bonds. So these are our hydrogen bonds. There's a weak hydrogen bond between adenine and thymine. So there's two of them that allows for them to essentially create the two sides of the DNA coming together and interacting. Guanine and cytosine have three of these hydrogen bonds that are bringing them together. Now, when we look at our RNA, we're going to see that it's single-stranded, so there are no hydrogen bondings with another side because it's single-stranded. And we'll also see that instead of having thymine, which is here, we substitute out thymine for uracil, which is very similar in structure but slightly different. So uracil is only present in RNA, and thymine is only present in DNA. Okay, here's our universal energy currency of cells, ATP. So the sugar here is adenosine, and it is attached to 3 phosphate molecules. Now, when we have this phosphate bond put onto this last phosphate bond, so monophosphate, diphosphate, triphosphate, that third phosphate essentially is attached there with a high energy phosphate bond, which can be removed, okay? So if we add water, remember that whole thing. So if we add water, a hydrolysis reaction, we are going to break the molecule down. And when we add water to this reaction, we liberate or we remove a phosphate bond. When we remove that phosphate bond, energy is released. And that's because that phosphate is put on the diphosphate. So the third one essentially is attached with a high energy bond that when we're able to do that hydrolysis reaction and let that phosphate bond go, we create energy from it. Now, you might imagine then, to get that phosphate bond here during a dehydration synthesis, we had to put energy into it. So that's the beauty of ATP. We put energy into that high energy phosphate bond, and then we can essentially remove it and generate the energy. So ATP is a type of nucleic acid, and it's the universal energy currency of cells. Hope you have a good week.